Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to focus on building the hybrid workplace safely and securely. In this webinar, we'll discuss enterprise mobility strategy and how this can provide both an important competitive advantage and a safe and secure hybrid workplace for your organization. Providing secure remote access is important for two main reasons. Firstly, it helps to ensure high productivity for mobile workers. And secondly, it improves security and compliance because it allows administrators to maintain standard configurations for company-owned systems. This helps to ensure that the best possible security posture is maintained. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce the companies and people that you'll be hearing from today. This webinar comes to you courtesy of no less than three organizations: IT Force, Unity Technology, and Micro Warehouse. I'm Roisin Cahill, Head of Managed Services at IT Force, and I'm delighted to welcome you online today. IT Force is an award-winning managed services company, and we pride ourselves on the quality of our service and have won various awards in this area. Most of you will also have heard of Unity Technology Solutions. Unity is a cloud transformation partner and is focused on delivering IT solutions and managed services in the areas of security, infrastructure, applications, and identity management. And joining us from Unity is Roger Turner, who's Head of Technical Services. You may be aware that Unity acquired IT Force last October. This acquisition enhances the depth and expertise of what both companies offer to our joint sets of clients in IT cloud services and security. Last, but by no means least, allow me to introduce you to Michael Coyle from Micro Warehouse. Michael is a technical enablement specialist and a Microsoft expert. Micro Warehouse are the largest Indigenous IT distributor in Ireland, and they provide software, hardware, printers, accessories, and more. Just a few housekeeping pointers. The webinar should last approximately 30 minutes with 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers. If you have any questions, please drop them into the questions pane that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. The webinar will be recorded and a copy will be distributed to all attendees afterwards. Please feel free to share that copy with any colleagues that you want to. For everyone who's attended the webinar, we're offering a free assessment of your environment to see if you're eligible for Always On VPN. And Kieran will send out a link to get this assessment later. Lastly, we'll be running polls during the webinar, and I'd like to do one now if you don't mind. So you'll see a question popping up on your screen, just in relation to how your company is currently working. So if you could take a couple of seconds to select your answer, please. And we might see the results coming on the screen. So that's kind of what I expect to see. Most companies are working hybrid, and the very small numbers are fully back to the office. That's not surprising, I suppose, given the last few months. So I'm now going to pass you over to Roger to go into some technical content.
Thank you, Roisin. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well today. We still seem to be having a very pleasant October, courtesy of global warming, I think, but we've just had the warmest September on record. I hope everybody enjoyed our Indian summer. So just to give a little bit of background about what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 to 12 minutes. Hybrid working. What do I mean by hybrid working? Well, in the context of what I'm going to talk about today, really that covers two different things. And that's not a deliberate pun on the definition of hybrid. I'm talking about hybrid working in terms of where people work from. And just to save confusion, I'll refer to that as flexible working, since that seems to be the term that's used certainly from the government in terms of their flexible working guidelines that are coming out shortly. The other is a hybrid environment. And today's session really is aimed at organizations that have both an Active Directory on-premise or in the cloud, as well as having access to Microsoft's cloud solutions, Office 365, Azure, etc. And how the two work together to provide really what we're aiming for is a seamless solution for all of your staff to be able to access all the resources that they need at any location. Typically for us, when we're implementing a sort of hybrid working solution, we'll use Azure Active Directory Connect, which is a server-based role that just basically replicates all of your Active Directory, all of your user accounts, all of your distribution groups, everything else that you need to run your organization up into Azure AD stroke Office 365. Why do we do that? Well, in order to have seamless access to both sides of the house, if you like, between your on-premise Active Directory servers, etc., and applications, as well as the services that are provided in the Microsoft Cloud, such as Office 365, as well as Microsoft Intune or Endpoint Manager, as it's called now. You need to have the two connected together. And in order to do that, you need to have the connections in place. One of the offerings that's coming out of this webinar would be an assessment of your environment to see what needs to be in place for you to have all of the workings put in action. We're going to talk a little more detail a little bit later around always on VPN, which my colleague in Micro Warehouse, Michael, is going to cover. But just to make it nice and high level, what I'm talking about is how you can get your staff to connect to everything that they want, regardless of where they're located, and what's required to put that in place. Very much the focus on that is to provide a seamless experience. I know for a fact that many people, when we had the first lockdown, they basically had to decamp out of the office in usually an unplanned manner. And I know we've got some customers who are still using remote connection software to allow them to connect from laptops that they were given into desktops that sit in the office. There are other ways that people are working, but it means that the experience that your staff are having is not the same as when they were sitting in the office. It may be close to it. It may be almost the same in some cases. In other cases, it may be quite different. It's not the perfect solution. We were in a pandemic situation, so decisions had to be made, and the best was made of those decisions. We're now in a much better place with a high degree of vaccinations, and essentially a lot of the restrictions that would prevent people from coming back into the office are going to be taken off at the end of this month. I know some of my colleagues in some of the bigger organizations are already back in the office. There's one friend of mine who works in Microsoft who just put a picture up on Facebook of him back in the office for the first day since the first lockdown yesterday, and saying what a strange experience it was. For him, and also for us in Unity Stripe IT Force, we were lucky in as much as we had all the necessary services in place, so that when the lockdown happened, people could literally pick up their laptops and go home and continue to work on all the services that we provide. And that would include our help desk, our service desk, the ability to make phone calls, ability to access applications, as well as cloud services, cloud storage, etc. And that's really the experience that I'm aiming to give you an overview of what's required and how to put that in place. Why is that pertinent at the moment? Well, as I mentioned before, not every organization was in the lucky position to be able to decamp and everything to be seamless. There are lots of organizations where people are now coming back into the office for the very first time. And that means that they're back in the situation where things can be put in place around management, etc., of devices that weren't possible when people are remote, because they weren't fully connected back into your environment. It's an opportunity now to put in place all of the structure and services that you need so that should this ever happen again, and even if, God help us, we don't have another pandemic, which I hope we never have, but we will have snow days, we will have power outages, we will have other things that disrupt the office. And on top of that, we're now into a position where a lot of people want to work in a flexible manner, that hybrid working. So the expectation may be that people are only in the office for a portion of the working week, and the rest of the time they're going to be working at home. So there's an opportunity now that we get people back into the office to actually put in place a solution that means they can have that seamless experience. And that's really what the heart of this webinar is about. So let me start with the first thing that you probably need to put in place, and which you may be aware of, which is to look at the hardware. So what do you need to give people a seamless experience? Well, ideally, you give them a laptop or a tablet, and preferably it should be one that has ease of use, is designed to be carried around, is light. We're lucky in respect to Unity and IT Force in as much as we standardize on the actual products that we sell, which is the Microsoft Surface range of devices. That's predominantly the Surface Book, the Surface Laptop, and the Surface Pro. The great advantage of all of these is they are designed to be easily portable. They're designed to be used in different locations. The microphones and the other setup on them is designed for portable use and to link into other Microsoft technologies such as Teams, etc. Why is that important in terms of the context of your users? Again, to come back to that seamless experience, you want to give someone a platform that works in the same way, regardless of the location that they're in. And it should be nice and transportable and light. I know that for some organizations, they had to go out and purchase laptops in a rush. That obviously had budget constraints and everything else. And people typically are not enamored of heavy black bricks. So in terms of if you have time to start thinking about planning the experience for your users, then picking a good platform, whether it's the Microsoft Surface range or it is from other manufacturers, do have a look at that. Biometrics, Windows Hello, those kind of functions that are supported that give enhanced security for remote working are also reasons why you might go for that particular solution. So there we have our nice lightweight platform. We can go backwards and forwards between Office or wherever else we are, a digital hub, or back into the home working. How do we connect all that together, and how does it work in what I've described in terms of a hybrid environment? One of the things that sometimes gets forgotten for organizations that have both on-premise as well as cloud services in the Microsoft realm is that you need line of sight to both in order for all of the services to work together seamlessly, and allow you to manage all of the devices and allow you to give people a nice experience where they don't have to worry about having to do anything in terms of, if they're at home, they don't have to open up a VPN client, they don't need to do anything else. We're all used to the fact that you can connect into the services in Microsoft's cloud seamlessly. It can run in a browser. You can do all these things that you would normally do. If you're using the desktop suite, you can use all of the desktop tools. The licensing you require for that really is around the Microsoft 365 Business Suite, or if you're in the enterprise, Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. The reason I mention that licensing is because in order to support this kind of scenario, you need some of the back-end tools, such as Microsoft Endpoint Manager, in order to be able to push out the connectivity tools. And this is certainly the case in Microsoft Always On VPN. So why do we need a VPN? I'm not going to steal too much of Michael's thunder on this because he's going to talk about this shortly. But in order for you to have connectivity through to all your applications, in order to be able to get those and connect, and if you've got map drives, for instance, at the moment that people are still using, rather than using Teams and OneDrive, etc., or SharePoint, is you need line of sight back to your domain controllers. How do you get that? You need a VPN. What kind of VPN is the best one? One that's seamless and just works. And that's really what Microsoft Always On VPN does. The other advantage in this context is that from a security perspective, we can apply nice things like multi-factor authentication, etc. Why do we need this kind of VPN solution? Well, if you're like me, and you probably are, you've got a number of applications that are fairly old-fashioned in the way that they work. They are what we call client server, without getting too technical. The bottom line, it sits on a server. Its expectation is it has a client. The client is normally quite what we call fat, and the connection between the two is expected to run over a local area network. How do we make that kind of solution available when people are remote? If you just use the client and you use a VPN solution, the performance generally is subpar. Because of the latency, the amount of time it takes for the data to go from a server down to the client and back again. How do you resolve that? Another piece of technology that we use, and you may use similar ones, is Azure Virtual Desktop. You may be using Citrix. The reason I mention Azure Virtual Desktop is because it is cloud-based, and certainly in my case, and what we've done for other customers, is to take their existing legacy applications, move them up into Microsoft Cloud. That gives you two advantages. One is that we can actually put in a nice, easy to use virtual desktop solution. The other is that you're no longer tied to a physical location. So certainly for organizations that have maybe the server sitting in a corner or a couple of boxes running Exchequer, for instance, or something similar to that, you can move that up into Microsoft Cloud and then give access to it virtually. And that access then remains the same, whether people are in the office or whether they're at home. So that seamless experience remains the same, and it doesn't matter where people are located. Once you've done that, you can then look at how this is all secured. I mentioned before around the advantages of using Always On VPN, because it's secured by Azure multi-factor authentication, because it's part of the Microsoft suite. There are a range of different solutions that we use. I'm not going to dive into them in more detail at this moment. I can see there's one or two questions that will come up around the different solutions that we use. But the bottom line is that you need to be able to access all of your devices, whether they're in the office or remote, which means you need cloud-based tools, which is things like Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and you'll need that for deploying Always On VPN, etc. And you'll still, because you're in a legacy setup, still need to use things like group policy from Active Directory and everything else. AV, remote management of your devices, whether you're using Endpoint Manager. In our case, we use the Datto solution that integrates with our service desk application, which is again from Datto, it's Autotask. But what I'm trying to emphasize here really is that there is a mixture of tools that you may have in place at the moment, and by linking them together with Always On VPN, you can continue to use those while bringing in the new cloud tools as well, for the length of time that you need to remain in hybrid. That's generally dictated by applications that you have to support that aren't really cloud ready yet. So I've gone through a fair amount of detail there in terms of what you need to put in place to have a hybrid setup. So let me just do a little summary on that. So what do we need to have in place? So if you're going to put in place a seamless solution for all of your staff and you're in a hybrid environment at the moment, the first thing you need to do is have a properly managed hybrid environment. So if you have Active Directory, and you have Microsoft Cloud Services and the two are not connected at the moment, you need to talk to us and we'll come in and we'll connect the two together, and then we can start moving forwards in terms of developing a solution for you. As Roisin mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're offering an assessment of your environment to see how best that we can put in place a solution that will give you the same experience regardless of where your staff are located and where they're working. And based on that, we can put together a plan for how you can put in place all the different parts of the technical side of the solution to deploy that out, and then basically your users are then free to work at any location regardless of where they are with the same experience. And again, I've said it a few times before, to produce that seamless experience that means people don't really think about the technology, they just open up the laptop and they get on with the day job. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Michael to go into a little more detail around Always On Virtual Desktop.
Thank you, Roger. Just before we start, we're just going to do a quick poll here. Just would be interested to understand, so what VPN solution are you currently using? So are you using Microsoft Always On, not sure, or none? So just get you to answer it as quick as possible there, please. Okay, and we'll just quickly just check on the results here. Yeah, okay, so we've actually got a mixture, which is pretty good. So 33% of people have actually recorded Microsoft Always On, which is great. 44% not sure, and 22 none. And look, you know, and that's interesting there. Even like people are not using any there as well. Now, just give you a background. My name is Michael Coyle. I'm the technical enablement specialist with Micro Warehouse. We would know Unity and IT Force very well, and that. So again, you know, it was great to be invited onto this webinar. The team here do really good webinars and keeping kind of like customers up to date. So what we're going to talk about here is Microsoft's VPN solution, VPN Always On. So virtual private networks are common ways of allowing remote users to securely access resources behind a perimeter network. With the hybrid office here to stay, more and more people are being asked to work from home. And we know that. And Roger touched on this here very well, touching about, like, say, it's flexible. It's, you know, people can be in the office for a couple of days. They might have to go home. You might have a power cut. You might have different things in that. But you're able to work flexible. And the big thing I would say on here is, a question that comes up a lot is, why choose Microsoft's VPN Always On compared to other solutions? I would look at that in two aspects. One is the security side of it, but the flexibility, the ease of use for the end users is the other part as well. So Always On VPN is Microsoft's solution for providing Windows 10 computers with remote access to resources in an on-prem enterprise network. And the key part on here is the end user. Like, for example, I would always look at it as the example on here is, I'm working from home. I go in and I access my network drive. Say I work in finance, I've got an F drive. I go in, access my finance shares. Then I go in and check on a web page and that, and I'm working away. Then I go into Outlook, I'm accessing my emails and that. The end user doesn't know that you have to click on an agent to connect to the VPN. This is all handled in the background in that. And again, you know, I'll touch on it a little bit more in that, but that is the key aspect on VPN Always On and that. And that's what I would kind of say is one of the big advantages of it and that. So now, an overview on here from a technical side. So other than your domain controllers, your DNS servers, the Always On VPN deployment requires a network policy server, also known as a radius server, a certificate authority server, a remote access server, Once the infrastructure is set up, you must enroll clients and then connect the clients to your on-prem securely through several network changes. And this is where Roger talked about the free assessment. Avail of this here. See what your environment is like. Have you, are you equipped for this here? And this is the advantage of working with a partner who specializes in this area. And like we've seen from that poll, that obviously we have some clients that are already using this here, which is a great, testament to the team as well. And if I look at the technical kind of overview on here, always on VPN is supported only. It's a Windows 10 technology. It was first introduced in Windows 10 1607. So when we talk about 1607, it just shows you how long Windows 10 is around. And it's interesting on the day-to-day with Microsoft announcing the Windows 11 release as well. So 1607 means the 2016 release of Windows 10 and the 07. Microsoft worked on 2 releases, like say it was like a March and a September release and that as well. Now things changed a lot as well, because at the moment you have the 21 H1, the H2 release is going to be pushed out shortly as well. But that just shows you where it released. Now it is a direct successor for Direct Access. You might have heard of Direct Access, and that again was a Microsoft solution, but it was more sitting around the Windows 7. But the big differences on here is it's designed for modern infrastructure. Roger touched on there about Endpoint Manager Intune, about pushing out the actual client remotely out to machines and that as well. It's not a case that you have to walk into the office, put down a machine and that there, somebody installs an agent, then you go back home, and that a lot of this stuff can be managed remotely and that as well. And from a security side as well, it supports Windows Hello for Business. There's a lot of talk now about kind of going passwordless and that as well, but a key aspect on this here as well is it's around the advantages of VPN always on. Like in an ideal world, we would have our applications all cloud-based and that there. You'd be using, we touched on there about using maybe say SharePoint, you're using Teams, everything's in the cloud and that. But there's many reasons why that's not going to be the case. And it's a lot of the times it's to do with legacy applications. It might be as well, the documents you have are pretty large and that as well. So you need to VPN into your Office environment and that. Now this supports, with Windows 10, you have like say enterprise editions, you have professional editions and that, and a lot of people would be using the professional edition. So that supports VPN always on as well. The big thing for me is the no user interaction. In a previous life, myself and Roger used to work in Microsoft, and my job in there was I was a solution center manager, and we had a lot of people come in and we provided support. And one of the big things was around the VPN setup and that as well, where a user might have gone in, made changes, or there was an issue with the application that, and let's just say it used to be a bane, to be quite honest with you, and that it was good when Direct Access did come in, but the key part on this here is you're taking away that point of failure. What's my password for the VPN? What's the application I use? So, and that's a big advantage. Always on VPN as well, just for some of the more technical side. It supports IP version v4 and v6. Direct Access supported v6 only in that as well. Now it supports, there's 2 modes. There's a device and a user tunneling mode in that as well. And again, for the end user, it doesn't really matter from a technical point of view. There might be reasons why you go one over the other in that as well. We touched on as well about it's natively with Azure Active Directory and Intune. So Intune, Endpoint Manager, and that as well. So again, you are supporting different types of environments and that as well. The big thing again for me as well is around always on VPN is infrastructure independent. So in addition to supporting the Windows routing and remote access service, the RAS service, any third-party network device can be used as well, like a Cisco, Checkpoint, Juniper. So it supports supports different hardware vendors as well. And that's a big difference just in case over direct access as well, you know. So now just a couple of things regarding VPN tunnels. So the user tunnel. So this is automatically established. The user logs into their laptop and this is automatically done then in the background. Again, you know, the user is not clicking on an agent or anything like that, you know. So, and this is ideal for granting access to file shares, to applications, other resources. Like, you know, give an example, you might have, I'm looking at, say, finance, you might have a payroll application that is sitting, you know, on-prem and that as well. Works with any edition of Windows 10, 1607 or newer. So again, supports Windows 10 Professional, Windows 10 Enterprise as well. But again, just not to reiterate on this here point is, the big advantage on here is no user interaction. The other option you have on here is the VPN tunnels regarding the device option. So this is automatically established as the device is powered on and has an internet connection. Now, this is ideal for granting access to management tools like group policy, configuration manager, more maybe say from an IT perspective and that there. But change on this here from a device. This is not supported on Windows 10 Professional. It is Windows 10 Enterprise or Education, and it is 1709 or higher than that as well. Okay, so this is great. We're talking about the VPN tunnel and that, you know, how does this here work? And this diagram here is just a, you know, a short flow on how it works for the user and that. So the user logs into their VPN client in the bottom left hand corner there. So it's a Windows 10 machine. So the VPN client sends a connection request to the external IP address of the VPN server. Okay, now the Edge firewall then passes the connection request to the external interface of the VPN server. Okay, so that's the first key part I would kind of say on this here chain. The next part then, the VPN server passes the connection request to the Radius server. The Radius server receives and authenticates the connection request and that there. Now it needs to look at, will I return an accept or a deny response to the VPN server. The VPN server then allows or denies the connection request based on the response from the Radius server. And again, just, you know, this is where you take in, you know, the assessment from the team here, you know, go and avail of this here service and that, you know, to see, you know, what applications you're using, you know, why you would use this here. And again, you know, Roger made a really good point there. You know, March 2020, it was a case of getting people up and running. We had a lot of ad hoc solutions about, like, you know, like I remember Roger touching there about, you know, you have a machine in the office and you're remoting into that machine to access, you know, your device. There might have been one or two people in the office, the device turned off and that, like, you know. So now it's a case we need an enterprise solution for the modern, you know, workplace and that. And again, we are talking now, you know, yes, there'll be some companies that will return back to a fully office-based, but we are talking, you know, the hybrid solution and that. So Always On VPN provides a single cohesive solution for remote access and supports domain joined, non-domain joined, or Azure AD joined devices, even personally owned devices. And again, where is the big advantage? Ease of use for end users, because it happens in the back end as well. Like, you know, and you've got the security side of it as well, you know. So, and again, that's one thing from a Microsoft side, you know, from identities, logins, and that there is a key aspect, you know. Now, a lot of you will be aware of the latest Bond film, No Time to Die, in that. And I always kind of look at that. And if you look at Mr. Bond's favorite drink would be martini. And their tagline is anytime, any place, anywhere. I think Always On VPN could borrow that tagline as well. And again, it's just that flexibility from an IT perspective. I can put controls on it, you know, anytime, any place, or I can decide, right, okay, not this device or this location and that as well. Now, okay, thank you very much from my side. I'm going to pass you across to Roshan just for any questions that have come in and that as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. So there's a couple of questions that have come in, so I'll throw them out, and whichever of you, Roger or Michael, feel that I can answer the question best, work away. So the first one is, why use this VPN instead of using the ones provided by the firewall vendors, for example, Sophos or Checkpoint, that might already be in place?
That's a good question, and it's one that comes up on a regular basis. Why would I use this VPN solution instead of the one that comes with my firewall? There are persistent VPN solutions, as they're called, and we actually resell Sophos ourselves, and they do one, as do many others. There's two reasons why I would advise people to look at Always On VPN as a solution. The first one is that it's device independent. If you go with a firewall-based VPN solution, you're tied to that firewall provision, and that's it. You may be able to set it up in terms of it being persistent and seamless, and some of the open source VPN solutions that are out there do support that, but you are very much tied into that. The other sort of, I'm going to call it a disadvantage of that, is that you will still need an MPS or a Radius server to authenticate into your Active Directory through your firewall, so you'll still need some infrastructure. On that point, one of the advantages that I see, and certainly one that we've put in place for our customers, is that you can actually terminate Always On VPN into Azure. So if you can extend your Active Directory up into Azure, you'll need a slightly more expensive gateway, but you can actually then have your VPN connect into there and validate out of a domain controller and a Radius box that's sitting in Azure, so that then you're location independent. So if your office goes down, people can still connect into all those other services. And again, that was a point that I was referring to earlier in my particular part of the presentation, which is that if you move your application services again up into Azure, then effectively you've got access to everything from anywhere, regardless of what the state of your office is anymore. So people can all work from home. The office could be down for a variety of reasons, including, I suppose, its synchronicity. Our own office this morning was down due to a power outage in the industrial estate that we're in. So you never know when these things are going to happen, and it's an opportunity to make yourself more robust for the future, to look at this kind of Always On. So thank you for that question.
No problem. We might just take one more question then in the interest of time. So there's a question here: with Windows 11 just released, does VPN Always On support this new operating system?
Roshan, I'll take that question. The answer is yes, it is supported on Windows 11, but I would recommend people to, especially in a production and a live environment, Windows 11 is just released, and with any new operating system from Microsoft, I would give it a little bit of time to mature in that as well. So just so people are aware, with Windows 11, even though Microsoft are announcing today that it's been available, you'll more than likely just see it on new devices, brand new hardware, and that's okay. The update features, it's been talked about later this year, early next year, and that Windows 10, the latest release from Windows 10 is going to be made available as well. So if I was given a recommendation, stay on Windows 10 at the moment, and that there, unless you want to do some testing on Windows 11.
That's perfect. Thank you. So just to wrap up, I'd like to say thanks to Kieran, our marketeer, who set everything up for us in the background. Also, thank you to Michael and Roger for presenting, and to all of you for attending. I hope you found the information useful and informative, and it's given you some things to consider. So as I mentioned previously, you'll receive a mail afterwards with a copy of the webinar and the invitation to avail the assessment for Always On VPN. Finally, we will of course send out communications regarding next webinars, but if you have any requests as to topics that you'd like to see covered, please feel free to send them in to us. And if you think of any questions that you didn't think of during the webinar, we'll also answer them after the fact. So for today, thank you all for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.